think it's going to.
Is your synchronization done?
It's my analog synchronization. So I'm over here because the every quarter I try to go in Asia Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore.
Yeah.
And usually 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off.
Yep.
Customer briefings. And most of the big companies in the U.S., they have offices over here.
You mean in Australia? Or?
Australia, New Zealand, Singapore.
Yep.
And so they're working on, and the projects are often more complex in terms of use mixtures.
Yep.
And the scale. Like, you don't build a building for a single use in Singapore. It's going to be a multiple use project.
Yep.
In a very dense environment. So large projects, complex requirements. And a lot of Revit, a lot of Enscape, and a lot of experimental workflow.
Right.
I think particularly in Australia and New Zealand, they just decide to try things. And often think, I've had questions like, how far are we behind the States, or are we, like, no, we're way ahead.
Yeah.
And then it might quickly catch up. But in 23, when I started this, typically I would start in Singapore and work my way south, but then I realized the weather is going in the wrong direction. So this year I'm starting in New Zealand, and I'm going to work my way north. So I'll be in Sydney week after next.
Right.
And then I'll go back to the East Coast for a couple of weeks, and then go back to Singapore, where the weather never changes. Other than rain, it doesn't get cold.
Right.
And but it was in Sydney in the spring of 23, and I did a briefing with, this was a customer using Enscape plus SketchUp plus Revit plus other things, and got to the end of the briefing, and they showed me what they were doing with AI to render massing studies in Revit. Very simple, complex massing, but not materials, curtain walls, roofs, in context with a flat surface. And they would take that and create dozens of images to get on a vector. And I thought that was the first time I saw a firm use AI for iterative rendering.
Wow.
Where dozens of images were generated in the morning, and they'd have a meeting with the client that afternoon, and they'd sort of walk through them.
Yep.
And find interesting pieces in many of the images, and then have a sense of confidence to go forward and model deliberately. Right. The first pass was very simple massing study, and I would suspect each of those images, if you had to model to that level of detail, by the time you model it, you get your lighting sorted, you get your context, you get your materials, it's probably 80 hours plus.
Right. Right.
And I think they were using some Midjourney, but they were mostly using Veras.
Right. Which is interesting.
Yeah. And they seem to have come a long way. Where this morning I was mentioning at breakfast, they've got the ability to choose materials in an image as opposed to have to manually go around and choose materials to reiterate.
Yep.
And you can also start to rotate the image. So it looks like an image, you could rotate it and then get some iterative persistence out of the rendering, so you weren't having to recreate it each time.
Right.
So they seem to be able to. It's maybe not the flexibility of using a generic or a general tool for rendering, but because it's meant to be focused for architecture,
right,
get on a vector that's related to buildings. So,
but it's generating options quite quickly that are good to be able to do.
And they seem to have created a nice workflow for someone that, if they don't know how to create a complex text prompt, they've got visual starting points, little sample images, and you can use those to get started.
Right. So they use a visual language to prompt it rather than textual language.
Yeah. And I like what they're doing because you can use sketches as well. That was the thing that you don't have to, if you don't even know how to model in 3D, you could take sketches, upload them to your to the webs to the service, and then render those. And you did some examples, and I don't know if it was with Veras, but you're rendering some sketches from university.
I had sketches from university and I ran them through the it's called PromeAI, and it would actually
Was it Prome?
P-R-O-M-E-A-I. And I was running sketches into that, and it would actually render those sketches out, and then go through an iterative process to actually almost reverse engineer the design. So I had it resolved one stage, and it would do the rendering, which would colour the sketch, which was still a sketch, like a pastel coloured sketch. Then I went into black and white. Next iteration was more photographic, so I was actually putting later model cars in. This sketch was done in.
And you were asking for each of those?
No, just running it.
Okay.
Just built it. The sketch was done in 1980, and so the cars in 1980 were shown in the sketch, but it was putting modern cars in as each iteration went through, to the point where it actually presented you with an image that was essentially a city. So it had taken something that you had a design result at the end and almost reversed engineered a possible environment that would have given that design to you, which just seemed strange to me. So it's like an inverse design thing, an anti-design. But that was done with PromeAI. So any of those sketches thing produce these amazing images in terms of colouring them up, and also a seed for ideas in terms of generating models to it. But yeah, as I said before, I was also playing around with magnificent to landscapes and stuff out. I haven't done a lot further than that. I haven't had much go with Veras, but it's something I need to have.
One of the criticisms is that you can't turn it into anything that you can build.
Well,
I really don't mind that. I think it takes another. That's where you say the 80% is sort of done quickly, but then you have to take it over and refine it in a way that it's almost cleaner to start over. I don't know if I wanted to take it and give me geometry. I'd rather it give me the metaphor.
Well,
and then I have to, but I don't want to untangle the geometry that it gives me that I don't want. I'd rather have to do the deliberate steps of taking it to the next step. But it gives, I find that it gives me ideas that I wouldn't have considered.
Yeah.
And those are interesting areas to investigate.
Well, something that you often don't have time to consider either because of other pressures, whereas you get punched with a whole range of options, often out of the ballpark and at less field. But often there's a spark of essence in them which is useful in terms of solving the overall design problem. When I've used Veras, it seems to start generating a design, like I put a very simple building into it.
Right.
And I ended up with a 2-story, 15-room mansion. What's this about? So
it was too aspirational.
I wanted was a match by the sea.
I do find that process, you sort of pull the handle and all the bits of fruit line up on the dials, and if you don't get what you want, you have to just pull the handle again, and they all sort of line up better or for worse. But now it seems to be where you can know, I just want to move. Like with Veras, you could just say, I just want this area to change. I think that's quite useful.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to take very long where it becomes conversational. Because
I agree.
It's almost where, I've sort of joked that AI is just the architectural intern.
Yep.
But it's silicon-based instead of carbon-based. So you'd have that conversation with an intern.
Yep.
You go away and you come back and okay, yeah, that's what I said. But let's change it. Let's look at it this way. And it's that kind of conversation.
Yep.
As opposed to the image finishing and getting to that full resolution. I want to be able to just, I don't want to say talk to it, but converse with it a little bit. There's subtleties.
It's about having a dialogue,
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily like a normal conversation between you and me. But there is an essence of dialogue between expressing what you're looking for and coming back and doing the feedback loops.
Because right now the feedback loop is quite transactional, where you have to pick a tool, you have to highlight areas, and then you have to tell the tool what to do.
Yep.
As opposed to just sort of that real time going, I think we should think about this, and you're sort of already creating. I don't have to stop and pick a tool, just asking it as part of that conversation. And not only conversation for one person at a time, but conversation for a couple of people to look at it, think about it. And in most good science fiction, it seems that the compute is you're having a conversation with it. It's not keyboard strokes and shortcuts.
No, you actually are interacting with it, and it's giving you feedback loop to solve a problem or whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, so I like coming over here because the conversations, the projects, the work that gets done is so thoughtful.
Right.
And it's usually not just the transaction of having the meeting, but it's also time to meet with a director, to have a bit of breakfast or lunch, to have another conversation.
Yep.
And I like meeting with companies one-on-one because they can talk about business issues in confidence that you can't do when you're meeting with a bunch of companies on a webinar. They're not going to ask those kinds of questions because they're more proprietary of nature.
Yep. I think there's also scale. There's different dynamics in the smaller scale of things compared to maybe what happens in the US. And I think the other thing here is we also run our resources real hard. Like, we have to be innovative to make it work.
I don't know anyone else in the world with a workstation that has 96 gigs of graphic in it, other than you, Kerry. It's,
this is like I like graphics cards. I need to keep the shares going somehow.
Yeah.
256 gigs of RAM, 96 graphics cards.
I think that tower stops at my hips. It's quite a tall tower.
Yes, it is.
But the thing is that you have all the same challenges over here.
Yeah.
But I find the design is so very thoughtful. There's a guy that lives on Waiheke Island named Paul McCory.
Yeah.
And just
we
went
last time.
Yeah, we went. We had coffee and breakfast.
Yeah.
But his designs have won House of the Year. I think he won again this year.
Yeah.
And he's a one-man outfit.
Yeah.
He uses SketchUp, uses Revit, sketches, and his projects. If you look him up, he's building habitable sculpture. So careful, fine.
Right. But you have those people around the world, don't you?
Yeah, but you have to find them. You have to find the architect that's doing that kind of work. So I can come to Auckland and meet with large companies, large engineering firms, because the geography requires a lot of engineering talent here. And the geography doesn't tend to sit still all the time.
We have
Earthquakes quite severe.
Yeah.
And so you get this kind of scale where people are being challenged to do very good work. And I suppose I could get it in the US as well. But then again, these companies that do work at scale in Asia Pacific, their offices are here. So I meet with their teams over here and learn lots. I still meet with the teams in North America.
Right.
But, the kind of work that gets done in Sydney and Singapore and New Zealand. And it's a very dense environment.
It also is quite networked.
Mm.
Like, it's small, but then I know people that are in Wellington and they know of me, and it's quite a small. It's like two levels of separation because of the scale.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the orders of you're 1 degree removed,
two degrees removed, 3 degrees, and you know everybody.
The projects are, if they're not large and complex, they're small and highly refined. And I think one of the first companies to pick up Revit in New Zealand was down in Wellington. They're still going strong. They've got offices in Christchurch and Auckland now.
Yep.
And they're using Revit, using Enscape, full on.
Yep. The Enscape thing, I think, for me was a real game changer because of that interactive nature of it.
Yeah, that was the thing. You didn't have to wait.
No, you made the change and instantly it came up, and still is, in terms of looking at the discipline stuff, where we can actually recolor stuff through linked files. That's the big plus.
Yeah, that'll come. I've been told that'll come at the
But
just the ability to color code files. In some cases you want to see what's in the real world, but in other cases you want to see something that means something, not what it is. So that's only been supported since I think Enscape 4.2 supported Revit filters and material overrides.
that is so useful. But if you can run that, we can run that into the linked files. That means we can make all the services red, and all the air conditioning's blue, and do the transparencies, things real time, and you have a meeting, and you can see visually what's happening rather than combing reports and clash detections, which just don't kind of work in many ways.
Everyone that I've shown that to, the larger firms that are still not on 4.2, I think this will compel them to move to 4.2 because they can use it as sort of the metaphors they use are X-ray vision. They just want X-ray vision for buildings, and they use Enscape as a design decision-making tool, a visual decision-making tool with the ability to flick on a filter and see things then color-coded, not as the real world, based on where the file's coming from, what discipline is it based on.
But you put that in a VR environment and get the guy who actually has to deliver the stuff on site to walk through the space. Those guys have the experience to know immediately that doesn't look right, or doesn't feel right. And that type of dynamic, I think, is potential.
I don't know why it is, but I can look at a screen and read the text, and there's no grammatical errors. And the moment I printed the paper and look at the paper, it's like, oh, it's right there. Exactly. And I think that VR has that kind of artifact where you look at it on a screen and you put goggles on and go, oh, that doesn't work.
No, exactly right.
If it's, what is it, seeing it in stereo or something.
Yep.
But the as far as being visual coordination, it doesn't have the sophistication of coordination reports.
No.
But the fact that it's so fast and there's lots of problems that don't clash in the design, there's lots of, as Mike from Freeze Nichols said, there's lots of problems that don't clash and lots of clashes that aren't problems.
Exactly.
You just want to walk around and look at things.
Yeah.
And so that's the
cue.
It's not that it's sophisticated, it's that it's fast and easy. So we'll see.
And it's relatable too, You don't relate to a report, but you can relate visually to these things.
Looking around and finding it.
Absolutely.
See, and that's, I think, broadly speaking, where technology sometimes companies, startups tend to miss, is they swing for the fences to create a tool that automates a system or solves a problem, but it doesn't ultimately reduce the complexity of the problem.
No.
And if you're not reducing the complexity, then they're sort of adverse to changing behavior. You go, oh, but this is faster, but in their mind, it's like, yes, it's faster, but it's either not predictable, or it's a harder tool. Oh, or the other dynamic is the number of times I've seen people take a tool that's easy to use and do something hard, as opposed to use a tool that's hard to use up front, but then it's purpose built to do something easy. And it seems that people have an affinity towards not having to learn difficult purpose-built tools. They rather use tools that are easy to get into, with the understanding that if you want to do something sophisticated, it's going to be hard. But that entryway is easy. That first, just to get your head around the tool is easier, and then the rest is sort of figured out on their own.
Yeah. It's the broad brush approach, to encapsulate the complexity in a very simple concept or symbol that, you can position and take care of it at that level, and then you expand out the symbology, the symbol to be more complex.
Like Enscape is not, the thing is Enscape, it's I think now, like where it's come in the last 8 years, the rendering is profoundly beautiful. But early on, it was not the best rendering tool, but it was just so fast.
It was so fast.
And the people that were using it were not the people that were doing the renderings. They were just regular people that were using Revit and SketchUp. and they got results that exceeded their expectations, so it was fine.
It was also such hard work to get renderings out of things at that time. Like you'd have an Enscape model and you'd fire it with Max and you'd go and spend 3 days figuring out how the hell that worked. You know, that type of thing, whereas this thing was instantaneously there. Whereas Max, probably slightly better quality, but you really had to work hard to make it go.
You had to be able to predict what it was going to look like when you rendered it.
That's right.
And the number of times I'd push the button and wait for hours, and then as it got to the bottom of the screen or as it was rendering, figure out, I've got to change that.
That's right.
And then
the chairs are 6 inches into the
concrete
or something.
So you'd have to stop it, cancel it, move something, and then start it again. And as it's doing its thing, you'd find, that material, I was supposed to change that. So being able to see what you were going to get before you got it was a big deal.
Big deal. Compelling stuff.
Yeah. Race car on the top of the roof.
We still going?
Oh yeah, it's just
can't see it on the
yeah,
light.
just the screen goes to.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's. I think we saw this.
So if I could do that in Veras, where I could iterate and not have to push the button and wait, but just have that conversation.
Yep. No.
Or any of the AI tools where it's not so transactional. Type in what you want, submit it, wait. No, I don't want it like that. I meant to. I didn't think I want it to be different. Push the button and wait.
Well, that's what I do with the image in my website tools that I use and the Elemental stuff. They have Elemental AI, and you just say, write the prompt, and you just run it until you get the image you want.
You keep going.
Keep going until you find one that suits what you're trying to do. Maybe after a period of time, you might find it. I don't know. But all it was, you get 4 presented, then you get another 4, and you can modify the prompt as you go forward.
All right, so it gives you you pick the one of the 4 that you get and refine it.
And it either comes out as being a graphic piece of graphic art, or it comes out as a photograph. It's not like libraries of images or anything like that. It actually compiles the whole thing together. They all have that commonality. So if you're building a website, you want a 300 pixel square icon or something, you can just run it into that, and there it is. And the thing about it is unique. You're not repeating anybody else's uniqueness off, because it's as unique as it can be in the fact that the AI is obviously drawing from the libraries and stuff that's trained it, but it's individual.
I've seen that, the comments of it was a larger firm in New Zealand that did an internal survey to get people's feedback on using AI tools.
Yeah.
And I would say, if you're talking about, the 22 and from, let's say 22 to 62.
Yep.
The older demographic had an affinity for using AI.
Right.
More than the younger demographic.
So why do you reckon that was?
I don't know. I know my kids kind of like, Millie studied art, Jasper did psychology, and he's of the mindset that you can't replace people with AI. And Millie has kind of a, the idea of studying something that seems to be displaced. I don't think it's going to be displaced, but I think that it's used to do things that you wouldn't have the time necessarily to even engage someone to do it. And so that to me is like, it's democratizing visualization. That guy that Brian Romali on Twitter, one of the, I think you might know him, follow him as well. Yeah. And he had, this was just this week, someone has taken, I believe it's Babylonian carving elevations of people and activities, but they've animated. So you have these formal elevations of people leading cattle, or animals, or wagons, or walking, but they're frozen, and they've animated that using the exact same proportions as that elevation, but they've just animated the movement. It looks amazing. And I don't know that took anyone's job, because if you had to find someone to do that thing, to say, here's this concept I've got, now I want you to take this and animate it in the computer and do all this work, just to find someone who would do it, and then to find, I mean, there's budgetary constraints and all that, but I don't even know how you begin to.
No. It's a new way of looking at something.
Yeah.
I went to a digital lab thing when I went to Tokyo in January, and it was spaces that were completely full of that type of stuff. Interactive visual, you're involved inside the digital media as you went through these spaces. It's incredible, but similar type of thing of taking imagery and making them animate and walk. So,
It was still a flat elevation. It had a bit of depth.
Yep.
And they were just walking, leading
Yep.
cattle and walking with bags, all the same proportions, and it looked so alive. Are you seeing anything? Like I'm starting to see these other tools pop up, which are federated approaches to making buildings. They're online, but to kind of further the point of, does the tool automate or speed a process versus simplify the process? And so far, I haven't seen anything that simplifies the process. There's tools you can plug into Revit, that sort of thing, but where people are proposing tools that are completely detached from any Revit workflow, and they're purporting to make tools that are open source and cloud-based, and I don't know, that's what they usually talk about. Ours is open, it's cloud-based, it's on and on and on, but I haven't seen any workflow examples of, show me something like if Revit simplified the process of coordinating drawings, which was the thing that you had to do in CAD. Is there anything that simplified the design process further? And I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it yet. It's been 25 years this year.
Right. The most of the stuff I've been seeing is more about federating or aggregating stuff from different sources into a result, like something like Multiverse.
Yep.
Which brings in a string of things and then uses that USD format to
visualize,
to contain them.
Yeah, it's kind of it comes and goes, because sometimes I don't want the whole universe in the design. I just want a knuckle, and I just want to figure out that little piece, and I don't need the entire cityscape.
Right. No, you're going to be able to focus. You need to isolate.
Yeah, I need to isolate something. And then there's other times where I want to see the context. But I mean, Revit certainly has its detriments, and if you had to learn to use it now, those of us 20 years ago that were learning how to use it or more got to learn a little bit more with each release or report release. It's like, what's new in this release? And so you weren't overwhelmed because you'd already spent the time learning the first bit.
It goes through a lot of tools.
But now you'd have to learn a lot to get started. But I haven't found anything that looks like it might displace it in terms of, not in terms of features and function, but in terms of simplifying the workflow, simplifying the process. And I keep looking. I just, kind of don't watch TV and look through the tech sites and see what's coming along.
There's quite a few people out there trying to build these BIM systems, but a lot of them seem to be related to having cloud-driven backgrounds in them.
As far as aggregating and where you collaborate, which I guess is all okay, as long as I can get to my stuff and it's predictable. But the workflow, I think ultimately you're trying to compel people to change behavior.
Yep.
And I think it was Harlan last year at the roundtable event.
Yep.
That said that you have to make a tool. You can't just make it a little better. It has to be a 10x.
It has to be disruptive.
It has to be 10x better to get people's attention. Because if it's just a little bit better, you're like, okay, I've got my. Yeah, what I do is not as efficient as what that new thing you're showing me.
Yeah.
But what I do is predictable, and I can manage my business with it. But if it's 10x better, if I can move a door in the plan and it moves in the elevation, the section, and the schedule, well, that's a 10x.
That's right.
So that's the part that I'm waiting for someone, if they're going to make that better. And everything that I've seen online, the way I try to frame it is, how do you make the building? How do you make the content?
Right.
How do you make the documentation? And how do people collaborate? And those are sort of the three main pieces. And it got even, Revit didn't even have the collaboration piece early on. It just had building content documentation.
That's right.
And it didn't even have other disciplines involved early on for structure and systems.
Yep. No.
So, and the other thing that concerns me is when startups go after the building space. They'll quite often say in their technical interviews, we want to create the next Revit. And my mind is like, that's not what you're aiming higher than that, but you're not trying to make the next Revit. You've got to aim way past that. Don't even bring up that. If that's what you're trying to do, don't bring up that word, because then people will say, oh, well, what's Revit? Oh, Revit, that's Autodesk. Oh, Autodesk.
Yeah.
That's the world's. That's a.
You got to change the paradigm.
Yeah.
And saying I want the next Revit isn't actually changing the paradigm. It's just making a better Revit.
Yeah.
And that's not what it's. But
that's
that's
not
the
what
shift.
it's about.
That's not the shift you're looking for.
No.
And that's the problem. I mean, yeah, you could say there was a major paradigm shift.
If you tell me you're making an iPhone for AEC, it's like, oh,
yeah, that's right.
It's that, like, your grandmother could use it, or a kid could use it.
Yeah.
What is, like, you got to aim really high just to say you're making the next. I don't even think we use that term in marketing. Maybe, like, to try to say, well, we're going to make the next AutoCAD. There's lots of CAD tools, but to say we're trying to. Yeah. The intention was to create a tool that made a lot of that process obsolete, where you didn't have to manually coordinate changes between views of the project. Now there's new complexities with that, as you were saying. Some of the ACC stuff, you're trying to get your head around it. It's complex.
It's interesting, the complexity. We did a project using C4R about 5 years ago, and it was kind of really easy to go down.
Yeah. Beach Road.
Yeah, Beach Road.
Not very mysterious where we're headed. We're going down Beach Road. I wonder what's ahead.
Beach. But it was a high trust environment. There was demarcation lines. Everybody got in, shared the models they needed to.
Right.
It was federated, kind of worked. I mean, somebody could have got in there and blown it up very easily, but nobody did. Everybody was respectful. It all worked. But now we go in the ACC and there's this massive big fabric of infrastructure, and do you do it this way, and
right.
do you do it that way? And it just comes off as being so quite cumbersome. And then you introduce a new user to it, and they just freaked out with the complexity of it.
That's that predictable, efficient continuum. When they get to the last mile,
yeah.
I've known quite a few firms that they'll go from a coarse level of detail to a medium level of detail.
Yeah.
And then when it goes to the, inch and a half to the foot, they go back to a coarse level.
Yeah.
And draw everything on top of context. Or they might even draw on top of context at a medium or fine level.
Yeah.
But then they draw on top, they use things as references, and then they turn that off, and it's what's hand drawn. Because that's the control. Especially where things come together, they want to have the most control of that.
The problem with that is it's a major change through the process. They have to really scramble to update those because they're not updated.
Oh no, it doesn't update.
It's a one-shot hit. So
you change your section through your wall. Now you've got to go back and
you've got to go back and rebuild it. Whereas the theory is that BIM should run through that all the way through. But then the effort to get the detail into the BIM models to handle that is still quite major.
You might be past diminished returns.
Yeah. So it's that balance. You better just proxy it out and model it in something else, or what do? You will get state proxy thing, for example.
Your placeholder contains the location.
Then you build the detail or something else. You can't do the escape reader, it's there.
there still is a lot of double handling. You draw the detail, then it goes to somebody doing shop drawings. Then you're supposed to check off on those and approve them.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to model as much as I can in Revit and tag it all in with
So you can tag things.
absolutely. I hardly use text at all. I always tag everything I can. It's like, no. But if there's a change, and there will be a change, I guarantee it, well, I have control of that. Whereas if I've got 5 occurrences of text plasterboard through the whole model, then I've got to find those 5 and update it. Whereas this way, I just change the metadata on that particular object, and the tags update automatically. So, that's real leverage. It's worth spending time to make those systems work, because I know the job's going to actually change. I need to be responsible about that. So
that is one of the tough things in Revit. If you don't know how to anticipate how something might change, you might as well be drawing by hand.
Yeah, that's right.
It's,
so you need to build in a dynamism with it. It needs to be a dynamic thing. Well, that's how I always see modeling anyway. Once you get self-control with it. I mean, early on I've had issues where you model the whole thing in three-dimensional AutoCAD and then you go and take it into something like this particular software package, DeepMind, something. The problem with that is that if you change the geometry, you effectively had to rebuild all the rendering. So you had to republish it back into the process. So unless you've got a dynamic link, that's quite hard.
I've seen there's a couple of tools out there that aspire to automate the documentation process in a view. You have to select the view or the sheet, and then it lays out the documentation to a point of fidelity. Tagging things, dimensioning things.
Yeah.
I just don't know why Autodesk doesn't build that in, and it just runs in the background. Why it needs to be a deliberate step? It's just something that's where I think AI could be useful.
That would be useful.
Yeah, just let it run in the background.
Yeah.
So if you add another door, you don't have to remember to go back to that view and add another door tag. It's just doing it quietly in the background because you've designated that to be your...
That's right.
If it goes on a sheet, the moment you place it on a sheet, it fills out dimensions. It fills out tags.
Yep.
And you don't have to, if you remove a wall, you don't have to remember to go back if you've added a new wall, the dimensions of the wall. It's just that system is running in the background, as you make changes.
So why haven't they done that? I mean, when it was first put in, because I used to use a lot of AutoCAD architecture desktop, and one of the things that got me about Revit, it seemed to be steps backwards in terms of my ideas and how it's going to work. But Revit came in, the market drivers made it the number one in terms of dealing with it. A lot of the functionality that I thought would have evolved from the ADT AutoCAD days doesn't seem to have come to pass to me.
Well, that deliberate step of going to a sheet to say, do this thing, seems to be then you have to remember to go to the sheet to do the thing.
So why isn't Revit
I think
doing
it should.
as you say?
Like,
should do.
Yeah, that's your AI, that's your architectural intern.
Exactly right.
And it's doing the task. It's simplifying the process, it's just not automating the process. Because if you have to remember to go back to the view because you took something away, but then you added something back.
Yep. So
it's making decisions based on precedence.
Well, it's a cascade, isn't it? You change the source and the cascade alters to reflect the source. And updates automatically, whereas that's what we're really looking for. And does that in detail, not just in the elevation views or the three-dimensional models. I wanted to actually do that in detail scenarios. So, you make a change like take a shear wall out of something or other, and the whole model kind of rattles itself out right down to the detail what the new thing is going to be, without having to go and muck around redrawing it or anything. That's really
just if you take a window out, you put a new window in. Like if you change it, the tag is maintained.
Yeah.
But if you delete it and put a new one in, you've got to remember to go back and drop a tag there, or run a script, or tell
Yeah,
them tag or not tag.
But if you reload that window, then it's all taken care of. You say, I want this window now to have this definition instead of the other definition. And the things, the object is tagged.
Yeah, if you're working in an elevation, but over in your plans, it's dimensioning based on your standard.
Yeah.
It's tagging based on your standard.
Yeah.
The details are just running in the background as if you had another person
Yep.
in another session of Revit.
Yep. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And also active templates. Because at the moment a lot of stuff's put in with templates that are what I call static. Like they're great at initializing a project, but I want a template that'll restyle somebody else's project into the way that I work.
Mm.
So I can say, now I don't want to have dimensions like this, I want it to be like this. Whatever. And because it knows it's a dimension, how it's presented, it should be able to restyle that over by using an active process. At the moment, you'd have to go and select all the dimensions and then actually manually change them to whatever you want it to be.
Well, that's one of the things, talk about Magnific. They have transfer of styles. So you can have a source image, it could be a photograph, and then a hand drawing with a certain color palette.
Yep.
And you can style transfer that photograph into that style, and it'll create that new piece of illustration.
Yep.
So it's that style transfer across architectural projects.
Yep. So you could actually take real content and completely reuse it, and it would look like your type of style as opposed to where it came from. And you can actively do that through the project. Because at the moment, if you put a template over things like that, it doesn't actually change things. All it does is say, well, you've already got that definition. It renames it version 1 and puts the other definition through. You've got to go then and actively reset that object to have the style from the way I understand it works.
Yeah, I tend not to work on sheets until I have to. I just like working from clean plans, clean elevations, clean 3D views.
Yeah.
But what catches me out is going back and remembering, I pulled that door out and I put another one in. Now I've got to go back and dimension to that. I've got to tag it.
Yeah.
Because that's that manual step. Even if you tag all not tagged, you still have to push the button in the view. And I don't know that you should have to do that. You should just run in the background. And
well, 10 years in, I think but the last 10 years, I don't understand why they haven't started putting that stuff to it. Because the computers have got the capability, the ideas are there, but Revit doesn't seem to be delivering this type of stuff we're talking about. I would have expected it to be doing that 25-year-old product.
There's ways of doing things.
Well, you can program it. Yes.
That to me, that's just the architectural intern. You hired an architectural intern. You said, okay, while I'm working on this, I want you to go in there and start dimensioning and tagging things. And now you don't have to. The dimensions and the tag and the...
It's just implicit.
Yeah, it's just... If it goes on a sheet, this is what sheets do automatically.
Yep. And it's
just a background process. It's not even a button you have to push. It's just something that's happening in the background. You don't even see it.
That's right.
I mean, there are standards in Revit, where you tend to dimension walls from, or do you dimension openings or centers or doors, those kinds of standards.
Yeah.
So that's where I think it would be useful if you could just work. And if you put something on a sheet, you don't have to go back to that sheet.
No, and it's like
dimension and tag. It's just happening in the background based on what things.
That's what we like.
What things are. Yeah. Yep.
And the AI may be disruptive enough to start having some type of product that does that.
Well, I reckon Autodesk would try to charge a bit for that at first, and then eventually it'll be bundled in, because that's the Revit AI is the thing that you do that's cheaper than the carbon-based AI, right? It's just running in the background, but then there'll be enough grizzling, and eventually it becomes such a commodity. Why should you pay another $1,000 a year? Well, you have to pay $50,000 a year if you hire someone. So you pay $1,000 a year and get the Autodesk AI built into Revit to do run your documents in the background. But then eventually it's just become a commodity. The next thing is what you pay a premium for.
But then you get to the point where the AI will just read the Revit file directly anyway and build its own thing. Won't even need Revit.
Well, if you had a room full of people that could use AutoCAD really well,
No,
why
just,
would you need
the AI just does
3D?
whatever.
It would just do what smart people could do manually. It would just do that.
Yeah.
And it's just,
Whatever it needed to do.
Yeah.
Like as long as it can output a model, output a drawing, and
I
it
think
makes
part of
sense.
it is I still like doing them. I get quite a bit of satisfaction of just
Oh yeah, I know.
building a bit and turning it around, and it's a little gem-like object, and I did that. But if all the other stuff was running in the background,
Yeah, the model's the core. It's an irrigation happening there.
so anything else?
Sorry.
We chatted about AI. We
Yeah.
chatted about why doesn't Revit build documents in the background?
Automatically.
AI design, that's a freebie, Harlan.
Yeah, come on, Harlan.
Get on it. Yeah, because the goal is not to create features and functions, but the goal is to reduce complexity.
And yeah, and build on workflow. I guess. Just
We can turn this off now. We think of something else. We can turn it back on.
on our way to Clark's Beach.
Clark's Beach.
Clark's Beach. Camp Morley. Why a par is the